Welcome back. So we're back with Harriet Jacobs in the incidents of a life in the life of a slave girl. And before there was Anne Frank, there was Harriet Jacobs, because today you'll see her being hidden away. But let me get into it. The search for me was kept up with more perseverance than I had anticipated. I began to think that escape was impossible. I was in great anxiety lest I should implicate the friend who harbored me. I knew the consequences would be frightful, and as much as I dreaded being caught, even that seemed better than causing an innocent person to suffer for her kindness to me. A week had passed in terrible suspense when my pursuers came in such close vicinity that I concluded that they had tracked me to my hiding place. I flew out of the house and concealed myself in a thicket of bushes. There I remained in agony of fear for 2 hours. Suddenly a reptile of some kind seized my leg. In my fright I struck a blow which loosened its hold, but I could not tell whether I had killed it. It was so dark. I could not see what it was. I only knew it was something cold and slimy. The pain I felt soon indicated that the bite was poisonous. I was compelled to leave my place of concealment, and I groped my way back into the house. The pain had become intense, and my friend was startled by my look of anguish. I asked her to prepare a poultice of warm ashes and vinegar, and I applied it to my legs, which was already much swollen. The application gave me some relief, but the swelling did not abate. The dread of being disabled was greater than the physical pain I endured. My friend asked an old woman who doctored among the slaves what was good for the bite of a snake or a lizard. She told me to steep a dozen coppers in vinegar overnight and apply the cankered vinegar to the inflamed part. So you see, Black people as doctors, they're medicine people until that would be wrestled away from them. I had succeeded in cautiously conveying some messages to my relatives. They were harshly threatened and despairing of my having a chance to escape. They advised me to return to my master, ask for his forgiveness, and let him make an example of me. But such counsel had no influence with me. When I started upon this hazardous undertaking, I had resolved that come what would, there would be no turning back. Quote, "Give me liberty or give me death," end quote, was my motto. When my friend contrived to make known to my relative the painful situation that I had been in for 24 hours, they said no more about my going back to my master. Something must be done, and that speedily. But where to turn to for help, they knew not. God, in his mercy, raised up a friend in need. So you see, sometimes people stayed in slavery because of their loved ones. They didn't want to cause them pain or get them in trouble. Among the ladies who were acquainted with my grandmother was one who had known her from childhood and always been very friendly to her. She had also known my mother and her children and felt interested for them. At this crisis of affairs, she called to see my grandmother, and as she had not unfrequently did, she observed the sad and troubled expression of her face and asked if she knew where Linda was and whether she was safe. My grandmother shook her head without answering. "Come, Aunt Martha," said the kind lady. "Tell me about it. Perhaps I can do something to help you." The husband of this lady held many slaves and bought and sold slaves. She had also kept a number in her own name, but she treated them kindly and would never allow any of them to be sold. She was unlike the majority of the slaveholder's wife. Yes, she wasn't that bad. She was just medium enslaver. Like, please leave me alone with that. My grandmother looked earnestly at her. Something in the expression of her face said, "Trust me," and she did trust her. She listened attentively to the details of my story and sat thinking for a while. At last she said, "Aunt Martha, I pity you both. If you think there's a chance of Linda's getting to the Free States, I'll conceal her for a time. But first you must solemnly promise that my name shall never be mentioned. If such a thing should become known, it would ruin me and my family. No one in my house must know of it except the cook. She's so faithful that I would trust my own life with her, and I know she likes Linda. It is a great risk, but I trust no harm will come of it. Get word to Linda to be ready as soon as it is dark, before the patrols are out. I'll send the housemaid on errands, and Betty shall go to meet Linda. The place where we were to meet was designated and agreed upon. My grandmother was unable to thank the lady for this noble deed. Overcome by her emotions, she sank on her knees and sobbed like a baby. Yes, so this lady is participating in the Underground Railroad while a slaveholder. Miracles of miracles. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. I received a message to leave my friend's house at such an hour and to go to a certain place where a friend would be waiting for me. As a matter of prudence, no names were mentioned. I had no means of conjecturing who I was to meet or where I was going. I did not like to move thus blindfolded, but I had no choice. It would not do for me to remain where I was. I disguised myself, summoned up courage to meet the worst, and went to the appointed place. My friend Betty was there. She was the last person I expected to see. We hurried along in silence. The pain in my leg was so intense that it seemed as if I should drop, but fear gave me strength. We reached the house and entered unobserved. Her first words were, "Honey, now you is safe. Them devils ain't coming to search this house. When I get you into Mrs. Safe Place, I'll bring some nice hot supper. I specs you need it after this scaring." Betty's vacation led her to think eating the most important thing in life. She did not realize that my heart was too full for me to care much about supper. So sometimes I find Harriet Jacobs a little condescending, because Betty was offering food because that's the resources she had, and people can only love you from the resources they have. So please give Betty a break. The mistress came to us and led us upstairs to a small room of her own sleeping apartment. "You'll be safe here, Linda," said she. "I keep this room to store away things that are out of use. The girls are not accustomed to be sent to it, and they will not suspect anything unless they hear some noise. I'll always keep it locked, and Betty shall take care of the key. But you must be very careful, for my sake as well as for your own, and you must never tell my secret, for it would ruin me and my family. I'll keep the girls busy in the morning, that Betty may have a chance to bring you breakfast, but it will not do for her to come to you again till night. I will come to see you sometimes. Keep up courage. I hope this state of things will not last." Betty came with the nice hot supper, and the mistress hastened downstairs to keep things straight till she returned. How my heart overflowed with gratitude. Words choked in my throat, but I could have kissed the feet of my benefactress for that deed of Christian womanhood. May God forever bless her. So you see how she thinks kindly of this woman, but not so kindly of Betty. It's just these little nuances. I went to sleep that night with the feeling that I was for the present the most fortunate slave in town. Morning came and filled my little cell with light. I thanked the Heavenly Father for this safe retreat. Opposite my window was a pile of feather beds. On top of these I could lie perfectly concealed and command a view of the street through which Dr. Flint passed to his office. Anxious as I was, I felt a gleam of satisfaction when I saw him. Thus far I had outwitted him, and I triumphed over it. Who can blame slaves for being cunning? They're constantly compelled to resort to it. It is the only weapon of the weak and oppressed against the strength of their tyrants. Being cunning is nothing to be ashamed of. It's part of our culture that we brought from the continent of Africa. It's in our Nancy stories and our Brer Rabbits. Being cunning is amazing. I was daily hoping to hear my master had sold my children, for I knew who was on watch to buy them. But Dr. Flint cared even more for revenge than he did for money. My brother William and the good aunt who had served in his family 20 years, and my little Benny and Ellen, who was a little over 2 years old, were thrust into jail as a means of compelling my relatives to give some information about me. He swore my grandmother should never see one of them again till I was brought back. They kept these facts from me for several days. When I heard that my little ones were in loathsome jail, my first impulse was to go to them. I was encountering dangers for the sake of freeing them, and must I be the cause of their death? The thought was agonizing. My benefactress tried to soothe me by telling me that my aunt would take good care of my children while they remain in jail. But it added to my pain to think that my good old aunt, who had always been so kind to her sister's orphan children, should be shut up in prison for no other crime than loving them. I suppose my friends feared a reckless movement on my part, knowing as they did that my life was bound up in my children. I received a note from my brother William. It was scarcely legible, and ran thus: "Wherever you are, my dear sister, I beg of you not to come here. We're all much better off than you are. If you come, you will ruin us all. They would force us to tell where you've been, or they would kill you. Take the advice of your friends, if not for the sake of me and your children, at least for the sake of those you would ruin." I'm not sure her brother sent it, but I know that letter might have helped. Poor William. He also must suffer for being my brother. I took his advice and kept quiet. My aunt was taken out of jail at the end of the month because Mrs. Flint could not spare her any longer. She was tired of being her own housekeeper. It was quite too fatiguing to order her dinner and eat it too. Lazy parasite. My children remained in jail, where Brother William did all he could for their comfort. Betty went to see them sometimes and brought me tidings. She was not permitted to enter the jail, but William would hold them up to the grated window while she chatted with them. When she repeated their prattle and told me how they wanted to see their ma, my tears would flow. Old Betty would exclaim, "Lars, child, what you crying about? Them young uns will kill you dead. Don't be so chicken-hearted. If you does, you will never get through this world." Good old soul, she had gone through the world childless. She had never had little ones to clasp their arms around her neck. She had never seen their soft eyes looking into hers. No sweet little voices had called her mother. She had never pressed her own infants to her heart with the feelings that even in fetters there was something to live for. How could she realize my feelings? And part of it, my love, is that the hardship of slavery, you have to toughen up to live it. But because you've had this privileged life, relatively privileged life, you can look down on poor Betty. Betty's husband loved children dearly and wondered why God had denied them to him. He expressed great sorrow when he came to Betty with the tidings that Ellen had been taken out of jail and carried to Dr. Flint's. She had the measles a short time before they carried her to jail, and the disease had left her eyes affected. The doctor had taken her home to attend to them. My children had always been afraid of the doctor and his wife. They had never been inside of their house. Poor little Ellen cried all day to be carried back to prison. The instincts of childhood are true. She knew she was loved in the jail. Her screams and sobs annoyed Mrs. Flint. Before night, she called out for the slaves and said, "Here, Bill, carry this brat back to the jail. I can't stand her noise. If she would be quiet, I should like to keep the little minx. She would make a handy waiting maid for my daughter by and by. But if she stayed here with her white face, I suppose I should either kill her or spoil her. I hope the doctor will sell her as far as the wind and water can carry them. As for their mother, her ladyship will find out yet what she gets by running away. She hasn't so much for her children as a cow has for its calf. If she had, she would have come back long ago to get them out of jail and save all this expense and trouble. The good-for-nothing hussy, when she's caught, she shall stay in jail in the irons for 6 months and then be sold to a sugar plantation. I shall see her broken yet. What do you stand there for, Bill? Why don't you go off with the brat? Mind now that you don't let any of the N-words speak to her in the street. News story come to bump, so the kid is very light-skinned, almost looking white. That's a source of contention for her. But how dare this woman talk about this other woman's mothering when she's an oppressor, when she's sending the child back to jail, when she's... Oh my God, I don't even want to continue. But when these remarks were reported to me, I smiled at Mrs. Flint, saying that she should either kill my child or spoil her. I thought myself there was little danger of her spoiling her. I was always considered as if one of God's special providences that Ellen screamed till she was carried back to jail. That same night, Dr. Flint was called to a patient and did not return till near morning. Passing my grandmother's, he saw a light in the house and thought to himself, perhaps this has something to do with Linda. He knocked and the door opened. What calls you up so early? Said he. I saw your light and thought I would stop and tell you that I'd found out where Linda is. I know where to put my hands on her, and I shall have her before 12 o'clock. When he had turned away, my grandmother and uncle looked anxiously at each other. They did not know whether or not it was merely one of the doctor's tricks to frighten them. In their uncertainty, they thought it was best to have a message conveyed to my friend Betty. Unwilling to alarm her mistress, Betty resolved to dispose of me herself. She came to me and told me to rise and dress quickly. We hurried downstairs and across the yard into the kitchen. She locked the door and lifted up a plank in the floor. A buffalo skin and a bit of carpet were spread out for me to lie on, and a quilt thrown over me. Stay there, said she, till I see if they know about you. They say they will put that hands on me before 12 o'clock if they did not know where you are. They won't know now. They'll be disappointed this time. That's all I got to say. If they come rummaging among my things, they'll get one breast saucering from this N-word. In my shallow bed, look at Betty, by the way, in the clutch, helping her, this Betty that she thinks is so simple. In my shallow bed, I had just room enough to bring my hands to my face to keep the dust out of my eyes. For Betty walked over me 20 times in an hour, passing from the dresser to the fireplace. When she was alone, I could hear her pronouncing curses against Dr. Flint and all his tribe, every now and then saying with a chuckling laugh, this N-word too cute for them this time. When the housemaids were about, she had sly ways of drawing them out, that I might hear what they would say. She would repeat stories she had heard about my being in this or that or other place, to which they would answer that I was not fool enough to be staying around there, that I was in Philadelphia or New York before this time. When all were abed and asleep, Betty raised the plank and said, "Come out, child, come out. They don't know nothing about you. 'Twas my old white folks' lies to scare the N-words." Some days after the adventure, I had much worse fright. As I sat very still in my retreat above the stairs, cheerful vision floated through my mind. I thought Dr. Flynn would soon get discouraged and would be willing to sell my children when he lost all hope of making the means of my discovery. I knew who was ready to buy them, the father, of course. Suddenly I heard a voice that chilled my blood. The sound was too familiar to me. It had been too dreadful for me to recognize at once my old master. He was in the house, and I at once concluded that he had come to seize me. I looked around in terror. There was no way of escape. The voice receded. I suppose the constable was with him and they were searching the house. In my alarm, I did not forget the trouble I was bringing on my generous benefactress. It seemed as if I were born to bring sorrow on all who befriended me, and that was the bitterest drop in the bitter cup of my life. After a while, I heard approaching footsteps. The key was turned in my door. I braced myself against the wall to keep from falling. I ventured to look up, and there stood my kind benefactress alone. I was too much overcome to speak and sunk down upon the floor. I thought you would hear your master's voice, she said, and knowing you would be terrified, I came to tell you there's nothing to fear. You may even indulge in a laugh at the old gentleman's expense. He is so sure you're in New York that he came to borrow $500 to go in pursuit of you. My sister had some money to loan on interest. He had obtained it and proposes to start for New York tonight. So for the present, you see you are safe. The doctor will merely lighten his pocket, hunting after the bird he has left behind. Very exciting. Very exciting. So yeah, I'm glad she's safe, all the trouble going on, though I poked at her a little bit. But yeah, just recognizing the nuances, because sometimes all of us make those statements without thinking about the other side. What's it like to be Betty? Tell me what you think. Thanks so much for listening.